You're locked into DodorVibe FM from Little Haiti to the world. And right now, it's time to dive in. This is DodorVibe Deep Dive, your rundown of the top stories that mattered this week, from Haiti to the US, Port-au-Prince to Paris, and across the Caribbean diaspora. News, culture, and headlines that hit home. Whether you missed it or need a recap, we've got you. This is DodorVibe Deep Dive, and it starts right now. Let's go. June 3rd to June 9th, 2025.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're jumping into a really timely stack of sources you've shared with us today, looking at two significant but maybe unexpectedly linked developments.
That's right. On one hand, we're digging into the recent travel restrictions announced by President Trump. Big news there.
Yeah, definitely.
And on the other, we're exploring a fascinating initiative unfolding right now within Haiti itself, the Patriotic Congress for the reorganization of Haiti.
Okay, so our goal here is to unpack all this material together. We want to get a clear picture of the travel ban's details, the reasons given for it, and importantly, the wide-ranging human impact it's already having.
And then, we'll pivot to this internal Haitian effort, try to understand its context, its goals, and the concrete proposals emerging from it. It's about seeing how these external policies and internal struggles are sort of playing out simultaneously.
Okay, let's dive in then. The big news broke on June 4th, right? President Trump's announcement about new travel restrictions. What did the sources tell us was the core of that proclamation?
Well, the sources specify that starting on Monday, June 9th, so very soon, foreign nationals from a list of countries would face entry restrictions. Specifically, 12 countries would have full restrictions, while another 7 would face partial ones.
Right, and that list of 12 fully restricted countries, let's see, it's Afghanistan, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Myanmar, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen.
Exactly. And the 7 facing partial restrictions are Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela.
So for those 7, what does partial restriction actually mean in practice?
According to the sources, it breaks down to this. Immigrant and non-immigrant visas for purposes like tourism, business, and student study are banned for nationals of those specific countries.
Got it. And this ban primarily applies to nationals from these countries who are, outside the U.S. and don't already have a valid visa by the effective date. But the sources do mention some exemptions, right?
They do, yeah. The proclamation itself details exemptions for categories like green card holders, people using a different passport if they're dual nationals, certain adoption visas, specific types of immediate relative visas for U.S. citizens, also diplomats.
Okay.
And notably, Afghan special immigrant visas, the SIVs, they are exempted. Plus, there are provisions for potential case-by-case exceptions based on national interest.
Okay, that covers the who and the where, the mechanics of it. But, knowing the controversy around past bans, I'm really curious about the why. What reasons did the administration give this time? What did the sources say was the stated justification?
Well, the stated reasons, based on the sources, centered heavily on national security. The administration claimed these countries either lacked adequate screening and vetting procedures or couldn't effectively manage.
Right. Or verify travel documents.
Exactly. Verify travel documents effectively.
I noticed the sources mentioned visa overstays, too, as a justification in several cases. But they also pointed out something interesting. Sometimes those high overstay rates corresponded with a really small number of total visas issued for that country. Like tiny numbers sometimes.
That's a key detail the sources highlight, yeah. And it kind of raises a question about the scale of the issue relative to the overall numbers involved. Another point the administration brought up, according to the sources, was the June 2nd attack in Boulder, Colorado. They referenced the attacker being an immigrant from Egypt who arrived on a visa.
Wait, so they referenced a specific incident involving someone from Egypt? But Egypt isn't on the list. That's something the sources definitely flagged as noteworthy.
It does. It sort of highlights how complex and perhaps inconsistent the rationale can appear when you look closely at the details provided. The sources also got into country-specific justifications. For Haiti, for instance.
Right. For Haiti, the sources said the stated reasons were high visa overstay rates and the claim that the country lacks a centralized government capable of vetting nationals for national security threats.
And for Cuba, the sources mention it being cited as a state sponsor of terrorism. The administration also claimed Cuba's government doesn't cooperate on law enforcement or take back deportees. Though one source does add a bit of context that this seemed to affect a relatively small number of recent visa issuances.
Okay. And Venezuela came up multiple times, didn't it? For slightly different reasons.
It did, yeah. According to the sources, Venezuela was cited for lacking a competent central authority for things like passports and civil documents, and also lacking appropriate screening. Historically, they refused deportees, although. Well, one source notes that under Maduro, Venezuela has recently accepted deportation flights, even sending planes to help with returns. So a bit of a shift there, perhaps. The sources also note that Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act regarding Venezuela, and he made a claim which the sources explicitly state is without evidence and contradicted by U.S. intelligence, linking migration to the Tren de Aragua gang and the Maduro government.
Okay, so that gives us a breakdown of the stated reasons, at least as presented in the sources. But of course, policies like this have real-world impacts, huge impacts. What did the sources share about how this ban is actually affecting different communities?
Well, the overwhelming sentiment described across the sources is one of fear and uncertainty. It's leading to significant chaos and disruption, particularly for people already in pretty vulnerable situations.
I can imagine.
One source quoted Jamal Abdi of the National Iranian American Council saying it brings back tragic stories from the first ban, people unable to see family, attend crucial life events, forced to rely on things like watching weddings on Zoom, just heartbreaking stuff.
And Iran's foreign ministry condemned it too, didn't they? Saying it reflected deep-seated hostility.
Yes, and for Afghans, the sources indicate the impact is particularly severe, especially for those who had fled the Taliban regime hoping for resettlement somewhere safe. There's this story of Amal stuck waiting in Pakistan, fearing the ban puts Afghans from a bad to worse situation. Really brings it home.
And even with that SIV exemption we mentioned earlier, the special immigrant visa for those who help the U.S., the perspective from groups like #AfghanVac, quoted in the sources, is that the ban still disproportionately hits Afghans seeking lawful ways to enter.
Exactly. Sean Van Diver from #AfghaniVac called Afghanistan's inclusion a moral disgrace that, in his words, spits in the face of our allies, our veterans, and every value we claim to uphold. That's really strong language from the sources.
It really highlights the perceived betrayal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for Haitians.
Yeah.
The sources paint a picture of this being just the latest blow.
Yeah, absolutely. It follows that Supreme Court decision on humanitarian parole, and it lands squarely in the middle of Haiti's worst crisis in decades. You've got gangs controlling over 80% of the capital, massive displacement, widespread food insecurity. It's just devastating.
And Haiti's Foreign Affairs Ministry is quoted saying they're trying to work towards a solution, pointing out that the ban comes precisely when their government is actually trying to fight insecurity and strengthen border security on their end. Kind of ironic timing.
It is, and there's an analyst quote from Renata Segura in the sources that directly challenges one of the specific U.S. justifications for including Haiti, this idea that Haitian gangs are somehow entering the U.S. via legal means. She calls that completely out of the realm of the possible. So you get these contrasting perspectives right there in the source material.
And we also hear the voices of Haitian Americans. Dominique Alphonse-Sainville is quoted saying it feels like a hard realization, and she's just left asking, what's the next step? What do you even do?
And Pastor Jean-Alex Paul's experience gives a very concrete example. His planned trip for nonprofit work supporting children in Haiti was just canceled because of this. Flat out canceled.
Wow.
Yeah. He expressed concern about the future of his organization, Together for Haiti, and even mentioned the difficulty of just getting answers from officials because the gang presence near the U.S. Embassy in Port-au-Prince makes access so hard.
And that feeling from Dominique Alphonse-Sainville again, that the people impacted have plenty to contribute and they just feel desolate. It really captures that sense of lost opportunity and despair that comes through in the sources.
Definitely. And Venezuelans and Cubans are also cited as feeling a significant impact, especially, again, after that Supreme Court ruling on humanitarian parole affected those routes. Venezuela's Interior Minister, Diosdado Cabello, even issued a warning quoted in one source saying that being in the United States is a great risk for any person now. A pretty stark warning.
Beyond the immediate impact on individuals, the sources also noted broader reactions, right? Condemnations from international bodies and advocacy groups.
Yes, the African Union Commission called for a more balanced, evidence-based approach. Somalia's ambassador struck, perhaps, a more diplomatic note, promising to work with the U.S. And then you have Oxfam America head Abby Maxman calling the ban a chilling return to fear, discrimination, and division.
And the House Haiti Caucus co-chairs, Representatives Clark and Presley, they issued a particularly strong statement, didn't they? Calling it an unambiguously xenophobic attack, a deliberate act of cruelty, based on, quote, baseless accusations and one man's insatiable hate. They pledged to fight it, according to the sources.
Strong words indeed. And one practical point the sources bring up is just the uncertainty surrounding the actual implementation, especially since the ban starts Monday, June 9th, like right away. There are questions about how it will affect operations, particularly at major hubs like Miami International Airport MIA, which sees a lot of traffic from these regions.
Right. The State Department has apparently said current valid visas are still good, but ultimately discretion lies with the Customs and Border Protection agents at the ports of entry.
Exactly. And airlines reportedly sought guidance but were just referred to CBP, so it highlights that there are still questions about how exactly this will play out on the ground right at the border.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty.
And it's worth remembering, as the sources do note, that this isn't, a totally new concept under this administration. There were previous travel bans enacted back in 2017, targeting different sets of countries, including several predominantly Muslim nations.
So that gives us a really detailed picture of this new external restriction, the stated reasons, and the considerable human and political fallout described in the sources. What's fascinating, though, is that while all of this is happening externally, the sources also reveal this major, dedicated effort underway within Haiti itself.
That's right. That's the Patriotic Congress for the Reorganization of Haiti, or PCRH. The sources describe it as a pretty significant grassroots initiative. It was launched by Haitian academics and civil society leaders, crucially, involving participants from both Haiti and the diaspora, bringing everyone together.
And the context, it couldn't be more critical, could it? Haiti is facing this prolonged, multifaceted crisis, a nearly complete institutional collapse, rampant gang violence. The sources state over 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince, is under gang control.
80%?
Yeah. A deep political vacuum. No national elections since 2016. Essentially no elected officials currently. Add to that over 1 million people displaced internally, widespread food insecurity affecting 5.7 million people, and 6 consecutive years of economic decline? It's staggering.
It really is. And the PCRH is framed as a direct response to this dangerous political vacuum, as the sources put it. The lead organizer, Jackie Lumark, is quoted emphasizing, "The Patriotic Congress is not seeking political office. We want to help rescue the nation, not govern it." That seems key.
That's a really important distinction.
Yeah. The core goal is to analyze the crisis comprehensively and propose bold, pragmatic solutions across key areas: public security, governance, economic development. The hope really is to bridge these deep divides and unite Haitians, both in-country and abroad.
Okay, and the structure, how is it working?
It involves a series of meetings. The virtual sessions held on May 31st were just the first of 12 planned. These include discussions specifically with the diaspora and also with representatives from all 10 geographic departments of Haiti. And it's all meant to culminate in a final national congress planned for Port-au-Prince on June 20th and 21st.
So quite an intensive process.
Very much so. And the first day's discussions, according to the sources, already offered some fascinating insights and proposals. For example, the panel on sociogenesis, kind of looking at the origins and development of the current crisis, traced the roots back to historical factors, including foreign interference.
And they specifically pointed fingers, didn't they?
Yeah.
At notable U.S. involvement in pushing what they call destructive policies and imposing bad leaders, citing the Michel Martelly presidency as an example.
Exactly. And that panel also highlighted systemic governance failures within Haiti itself. Professor Jemima Pierre is quoted emphasizing this historical point, saying, "In order to move forward, we must stop pretending our sovereignty has not been repeatedly undermined." A powerful statement about facing history.
That quote really connects the historical context to the current challenge, yeah. And the panel on insecurity. It sounds like it painted a grim picture.
Extremely grim. Sociologist Sabine Lamore discussed the specific vulnerability of women, as both economic providers and often victims of sexual violence, and how insecurity is fundamentally reshaping social norms. Even things like how funerals are conducted, how people interact day to day, it's all changing.
Wow.
And political scientist James Boyard provided some harrowing statistics, according to the sources. Over 16,600 homicides between 2019 and 2024, and at least 1,617 in just the first 5 months of 2025 alone, with many attributed to gangs that some are now designating as terrorist organizations.
Yeah.
He really underscored the immense humanitarian toll.
Just staggering numbers. And the panel on governance, what were the key takeaways there?
They looked at the profound institutional challenges. James Boyard argued that the Transitional Presidential Council, the CPT, which is the current temporary governing body, actually signals a kind of loss of internal sovereignty. And that situation is deepened by the complete lack of a functioning parliament and judiciary. Experts also examined the limitations of the current electoral system itself, big systemic problems.
Okay, so based on this deep analysis of the problems, what kinds of solutions were actually proposed during that first day?
Well, a prominent proposal discussed was the need for a unified command unit within the Haitian state, specifically to coordinate anti-gang operations.
The argument being that the current fragmented response just hasn't worked.
Exactly. It's clearly failed. Johnny Celestin is quoted making a very blunt point. Security must be reestablished before any transition can be credible. Security first.
Makes sense. What else?
Another key proposal was the decentralization of economic development. This involves pushing for significant investment in provincial cities, trying to move focus beyond the overcrowded and gang-controlled capital of Port-au-Prince. The idea is to rebuild infrastructure elsewhere and, crucially, reduce the incentives that draw young people into criminal gangs in the first place. Offer alternatives.
Right. Create opportunities outside the capital. Were there other recurring themes?
Yeah, other themes that kept coming up included the urgent need for electoral reform, finding ways to restore public trust through more transparent governance, and establishing long-term frameworks for engaging the diaspora that go beyond just relying on remittances, actually integrating their skills and investment.
That makes a lot of sense.
And Jean-Marie Theodat offered a really powerful thought on this. Any serious transformation must begin with restoring dignity to the majority who have been abandoned by the state. It speaks to that deeper need for recognition and respect.
So just to be clear, this PCRH, it doesn't have official decision-making power right now?
No, it's important to reiterate that, as the sources state, it doesn't have official power within the current political structure. But its stated aim is ambitious. It's trying to create the conditions for a national dialogue that's genuinely rooted in Haitian expertise, free from foreign imposition or, control by the traditional Haitian elite. Lead organizer Jackie Lumark is quoted expressing this profound hope that the initiative itself will outlast us, build something lasting.
So you really see these two major threads happening in parallel, don't you? On one side, we have this external policy, the travel ban, citing reasons like national security threats supposedly posed by gangs and the lack of effective governance in Haiti. While on the other side, you have this really significant internal effort, the Patriotic Congress, actively trying to analyze and propose concrete Haitian-led solutions for those very same fundamental challenges: security, governance, economic development. It's quite a contrast. And this travel ban, it just adds another layer, doesn't it? Another significant challenge and uncertainty for our country and a diaspora already grappling with such a severe internal crisis. It really highlights the complexity of how external policies, designed perhaps to protect borders,
can intersect with and potentially complicate these internal efforts by people who are desperately trying to build stability and solutions from within their own country.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the tension this creates. How do external restrictions, which are often framed through the lens of a country's internal instability, interact with and maybe even hinder the efforts of that country's own people and its diaspora, who are actively trying to address that instability and build a foundation for the future?
It really does raise an important question for you, the listener, to consider pulling all these threads together from the sources. What does it truly take to rebuild a nation from within, driven by its own people and ideas, when it's simultaneously facing such significant external pressures and barriers like this travel ban?
A really crucial question to think about. Thank you for sharing these sources and making this deep dive possible today.
Thank you.
And that's your deep dive. The headlines, the stories, the voices that matter, brought to you by DodorVibe FM. Catch us every week for a recap of the news that moves our people, our culture, and our world. Missed part of the show? No stress. Replays continue all week and are always on DodorVibe.com and on our socials at DodorVibe. Until next time, stay sharp, stay loud, and stay connected. This has been DodorVibe Deep Dive from Little Haiti to the world.